Hello, I'm Rachel, and this is my 2025 mid-year check-in slash freak-out tag. This is my second time sitting down to do this. Hopefully second time is a charm, and I can keep things compact because I have a lot to talk about and a ticking clock and, other things to do today. Also, as you can tell, I've kind of smashed a couple of tags in together that have been popular on BookTube in the past. I have a lot of attributions that I will leave down below. So yeah, this is always such a fun tag for all of us to, on BookTube, to take stock of where we are and to see where everyone else is in the community. And with that, let's go. So my question number one is, how many books have I read this year? And I'm technically in the middle of a couple, but when we're talking about completed books, I have read 49 so far. I hope this means I'm on track to get to 100 by the end of the year, which is my unofficial-ish goal. The best book I read so far this year is The Latecomer by Jean Hanff Corlitz. This is following the Oppenheimer family around the turn of the century primarily. There is family drama and family trauma going all the way back to a connection to a medieval court Jew in Germany who was accused of a crime and killed for it. In the present-ish day, the family gets into the arts, into politics, into decluttering homes, and into in vitro pregnancy during the 1980s. There's a lot going on with these really compelling characters. Next, we're moving on to favorite sequel of the year, and I am cheating a little with this by picking Air by Sabaa Tahir, which is the start of a new YA series for her, YA fantasy series, but it takes place in the same world as Ember in the Ashes, and it takes place like 20 to 30 years in the future, in part following the descendants of the original characters. So I think it counts, and I am taken in again by the complex political realities that she is putting on the page. My next question is favorite short story collection I read this year so far, and I have Cowboys and East Indians by Nina McConley. This collection follows a variety of East Indian characters living in Wyoming or touring in Wyoming. We also do have some non-Indian characters from Wyoming going to India and, having experiences there. And I just appreciate the variety and diversity of insights and experiences that she brings through this collection of somewhat connected stories. My next question is most read genre, and I am going by the shelving I put on my Goodreads page, and by that marker, my most read genre so far this year is Jewish fiction. I am expecting that to change a bit coming up. I'll probably read more speculative and maybe even general. We'll have to see how it goes. For new releases I want to read, I'm going to shame myself with books I bought that were on my top releases of the first half of the year, and I have not read them yet. And speaking of Jewish fiction, I'm going to start with The Anatomy of Exile by Ziva Bukai. I got this book signed at the Gaithersburg Book Festival. This is historical fiction taking place between the 1967 war and the Yom Kippur War. An Israeli family moves to America in between the wars and has some interactions with some Palestinians. Also about Israel and moving into nonfiction, I have The Thinking Heart, Essays on Israel and Palestine by David Grossman. This very small collection is his post-October 7th ruminations. Grossman is a progressive thinker I very much admire, and I'm looking forward to getting his take. And finally, the shamiest of all shame, I have Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. I have not read this Hunger Games prequel yet, even though I am a die-hard Hunger Games fan. I guess in part, sometimes the hype can be a little bit scary and disturbing, although in general, I think I've largely heard good things about this. I know the movie is in the works, and I really need to get to this now. Moving into my most anticipated releases of the second half of the year, back in January, I picked 7 books that were coming out in the first half of the year. So I decided to continue with 7 books for the second half of the year, and I'll go in chronological order with the understanding that publication dates might change. But starting on July 29th, we have While the Dark Remains by Joanna Ruth Meyer. This is her first foray into adult fantasy. I've read all of Joanna Ruth Meyer's YA fantasy. I assume this is probably going to be about the same, but, you know, I already enjoy the formula, so, you know, I enjoy her works. Also, once upon a time, millions of years ago, we were in a NaNoWriMo Vidler community together. Moving into August 5th, we have Happy New Year's by Maya Arad. This is translated Hebrew fiction. I read Arad's novellas that were translated last year and really enjoyed them, so I'm eager to go forward. We have a lot for September, starting with September 9th with The Bells by Lacey Dunham. This is historical fiction taking place in a 1950s girls' boarding school in the South. And Lacey Dunham and I were in a writing class together a million years ago. I actually saw her more recently at the Gaithersburg Book Festival, so that was exciting. Also on the 9th, we have As a Jew by Sarah Hurwitz with a perhaps provocative subtitle, to say the least. I have read Sarah Hurwitz's literature on the Jewish experience. I like how she speaks to the modern Jewish experience and her interactions with it. And speaking, you know, as post-October 7th, anti-Semitism has certainly been on the rise. I think it's good to recenter ourselves and recenter Judaism beyond that. Moving to the 16th, we have Among the Burning Flowers by Samantha Shannon. This is her next iteration into her fantasy series of the St. George and the Dragon gender bet retelling. This is an epic, sprawling world she's created with certain dragons that live in the West, certain dragons that live in the East, and the different cultural groups all around the West and the East and in between. We've been tracking, you know, the dangers of dragon uprisings and how to defend from them from various battles over various generations. And I think we're going near the beginning of this conflict now with a much smaller book than her usual. Most of these, the other two books have been sweeping and, you know, huge. And this one's a little smaller. I'm curious to see if it reads any differently. Then finally moving to the end of September, September 30th, we have The Sovereign by C.L. Clarke. This is the third and final installment of her fantasy series, which takes a secondary world and explores colonialism. The main character was a woman from a colonized land who as a child was forcibly conscripted into the colonizer's army. Then when she is sent to serve back in her homeland, her priorities shift. And she is in a bit of a sapphic relationship with the heir to the empire who is trying to make social changes herself. And finally, this one doesn't have a cover yet, but it is The War Beyond by Andrea Stewart, coming out on November 4th. I'm not sure if this is the conclusion to a duology or if it's just one part of the series, but it is the sequel to The Gods Below, which I'm currently listening to, so hopefully I'll continue to like this and will want to move on with the series. For a most disappointing read, I am going with The Mother of All Things by Alexis Landau, because several years back I read a historical fiction novel by hers. It really was, I think, my favorite read of the year. I loved it so much. And so finally I decided to return to her in this novel, and it did not click at all the same way. This is modern contemporary fiction where the main character is married to a man who is a filmmaker, like making, you know, big action films. They go to Bulgaria for one of his shoots, and she actually meets up randomly with an old professor she had, a feminist professor, and they create a group of women who start enacting like ancient Greek rites of femininity, and this is in tune also with the main character trying to write a novel based on ancient Greek women, but I feel like everything was very preachy and the characters were very two-dimensional, and it didn't work for me. For most surprising book, I have The Hunter by Tana French, which I read for the BookTube Prize Octafinals this year. This is, you know, the mystery genre, and I tend to stay away from plot-heavy formulaic fiction. I don't really think it's my thing, but in this case, we're following characters who are just so compelling, and they have a lot of depth within themselves. This is even a sequel, and I didn't read the first book, and I felt perfectly okay with that as well, with kind of catching up with the main character where she was and going along with how she feels about what happened from the last book and how that informs her decisions in this book. So this was a very pleasant surprise. For favorite new author, I'm going to go with Elif Shafak. Going back to the BookTube prize, I also read for the octafinals There Are Rivers in the Sky. That was my second book of hers I read and I absolutely loved. Back in 2020, I read 10 minutes 38 seconds in This Strange New World and was very compelled by that. And I have another one of her books on my physical TBR, The Island of Missing Trees, which is about a Greek and Turkish Cypriot and their relationship in a conflict-ridden land. So I definitely feel like I want to get to this book and her other fiction as well. Going into the most controversial question in this tag, we have newest fictional crush, which what I do is I decided just to substitute this question for my favorite relationship in fiction or literature this year, and I'm even cheating with my own question a bit. First, I'll turn back to The Latecomer by Jean Hanff Corlitz, where I really want to emphasize the three triplets of the main characters of the story. Definitely not, romantic lovers in any case, but, they start the story with this, huge amount of resentment toward each other and wanting to differentiate each other from each other. They go to college where, those resentments and relationships really come to a broil. And then ultimately we see the impact and the fallout for what it's like for them when they're middle-aged and how things shift. And I wanted so much for these relationships. I was hoping, for the best resolution possible, but I feel like we got the most authentic one. My runner-up might even be more of a cheat when I talk about My Last Innocent Year by Daisy Alpert Florin, because the romantic relationships in here are in no way healthy, but I feel like they're really ruminative, and they teach the main character, Isabel, a lot about how adults have to make decisions and live in society. Like, we're starting with her own relationships, she has a discomforting sexual relationship with a peer, then she gets involved with a professor, and we have to deal with his inadequacies, and she's also witness to the dissolution of a marriage between two English professors, and I just feel like I was just so compelled with what she was experiencing and what it was teaching her about how relationships work. For favorite new character, I'm going to go with Quill and Dais from Air by Sabaa Tahir again. Quill is a second-generation character in this book, the nephew of my favorite character in the last series, and he also has to deal with the idea of rulership and combating interests in keeping his empire afloat, and he just generally seems like a good-hearted character. And somewhat on the opposite end, we have Ais, who is sympathetic in that she grew up incredibly impoverished and oppressed, but she took these experiences and experiences in the book and goes down a dark path, which is understandable, but I feel like, Tahir is really challenging us about how the sort of cruelty she inculcates gets started and its toxicity. And my runner-up character is similar, and another YA fantasy, also a sequel novel, talking about Our Deadly Designs by Kaylin Josephson and the character of Damien. I feel like so many stories can rely on simplistic world building and morality. The change characters make usually is that they go from being on the wrong side of history to the right side of history. For Damien, his worldview in large part is sympathetic and helpful to others, except that he starts to make choices on his path that are far more questionable. So it's a more nuanced look at reality and the choices that we make that's not so black and white, and I just like where he ended up as well. For a book that made me cry, I'm going with The Safekeep by Yael van der Wouden, the recent winner of the Women's Prize in Fiction. This is a book that in large part we're following a character who is isolated in her home in the Netherlands in the 60s. She is the unwitting hostess to her brother's new fiancé, but it's really Eva who, well, I guess more than sadness brings the anger, because Eva is a Holocaust survivor. She's suffered a lot of losses, obviously. Then she comes back home to the Netherlands and is met by, at best, complete apathy to her plight, and at worst, just more oppression. And there's just so much, sadness and anger about the cruelties that we do to one another. Of course, there's a universal aspect to this, but I'm also very, drawn to the Jewish history, that after our worst genocide, this cruelty and this violence against Jews could continue. For a book that made me happy, I'm going for Low-Hanging Fruit with Happiness by Aminata Forda. I think this is a relatively happy book, especially in the case that it really centers around a group of people where there's two protagonists really, but they create their own little community in London where they're both kind of outsiders at the time, and they create a community of kind of outsiders, but these outsiders together make a community of people who look out for one another and progress the story, and there's just a lot of comfort and hominess and hope, I think, within the relationships and the action of this story. For my favorite review or booktube video, I'm going to go with my 2025 Gaithersburg Book Festival video, in part because I had to skip in 2024 because I had the COVID. I promised I'd stop whining about it. Apparently I haven't. Something else I did when coming back home to the Gaithersburg Book Festival is I didn't bring my usual camera. I was just filming on my phone, and I feel like I was able to get better, footage for, documenting the festival that way, and I'm pretty proud of that. For my best adaptation I watched this year, I'm going to go with Pachinko Season 2. And I have the book, and I really like the book, and I'm very intrigued by the similarities and differences in the Apple TV show. I think they really thematically have nailed a lot of great stuff about Sunja's journey, and now, especially in Season 2, the journey of her son Noah, and just so much about both, the characterization, but also the cinematography, and so much of this just really worked well for me. And I'll link to my review of Season 2 down below. For most beautiful cover I bought or received this year, I'm going with Olive Days by Jessica Elisheva Emerson. I just recently hauled this book in my big-ass Raid the Shelves Jewish Book Council event I went on last month. Anyway, what I love about this book is I just love the color saturation, I love the splatter of the olive as well, but I'm just drawn to colors, I think. For my next big priority in reading, well, I'm announcing something here that I'm about to go on a week-long cruise. I've never gone on a cruise before. I'm a little overwhelmed, and I feel like this would be a great time to try to catch up on some reading. I hope I can do that. I'm not sure much of a social butterfly I am. I do know I have a huge TBR behind me, and I have ideas about what I want to bring with me onto the boat, and hopefully I will make a dent. My bookish highlight of the year is incorporating the Buzzwordathon challenge from Books and Lala into my reading, particularly when it has to do with my Raid the Shelves book haul from last year. I get huge amounts of books from these Raid the Shelves book hauls, and I wanted to justify them by finding a way to read the books. And so for 2024, it turned out that Kayla's prompts for the cover Buzzwordathon for this year fit a lot of my books really well. So I am going through month by month and reading one book based on the cover and making good time with them. You can see my TBR videos down below for each book I picked each month this year. And finally, I get to what books I need to read by the end of the year. And again, I've chosen 7 to particularly highlight here that I have physically right now. Starting with my top of the Goodreads resolution that every year I try to skim the top of my Goodreads TBR of the books that have been on there the longest. So one of those books is Hardly Children, another short story collection by Laura Adamczyk. We have The Archive of Alternate Endings by Lindsay Drager. I think I read a short story of hers in a literary magazine for one of my Am Reading videos too. We have these 2 books by Michael Cunningham. I hope to read these 2 and another one. That'll round out all of my fiction reading for Michael Cunningham, I believe, and I hope to be reading and reviewing them as part of an author's backlist video at the end of the year. Going into Women in Translation Month in August, I picked up Aquarium by Yara Shahori. This was translated from the Hebrew. I picked it up at a used library bookstore last year, so I'm thinking this would be a good way to come and read it, although I might just go ahead and read some 2025 translated anticipated reads instead. I'm not sure. Then we get to Victober and October, and this is also, I think, a little bit of a cheat. Casella Wayne, or Will and Destiny by Cora Wilburn. Technically, this was written in the 19th century, but it was in America, not in England. I'm not sure quite how much you can say this is Victorian literature if it's not written in England, but I feel like I'm going to count it anyway, because I also, just want to get physical books off the shelves, and this is known as I think one of, or the earliest novel written by an American Jewish woman. It was serialized back in 1860. And the final book I'll say I want to read for 2025 is for Novella November. That's where I'm going with it. And it is this collection, In Sickness and in Health, and Yom Kippur in a Gym by Nora Gold. This is another book I got last year on Raid the Shelves, so I'd really like to be able to get to it and read these two long stories, I guess you'd say, for novellas. So there we have it. 2 for 1, too. And that finally about covers it for me now. I will leave Goodreads links to all of the books I talked about, and also Goodreads reviews if I've read the books, listed down below. And I'm just really happy to have gone through this. I feel like this year I've been struggling a lot with maintaining my interest in reading. I've been falling behind on all of my goals. So a tag like this can really help bring the joy back to me and hopefully let me tackle the rest of the year with excitement. So thank you all who have taken part in this tag. I've been watching a lot of your videos. I'm sure I'll be watching more. And I'll be back on this channel in the near future with my quarterly wrap-up for my writing goals. So stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone. And I'll see you next time.